in conversation with Emma Baggott, she, her, director, and Morgan Lloyd Malcolm, she, her, writer, about their production of Dracula at the lyric Hammersmith Theatre. Emma and Morgan are sat on two chairs. Emma is sat on the left and Morgan is on the right. Emma has short, dark brown hair and is wearing a black jacket. Morgan is sat on the right and has shoulder-length, light brown hair, wearing a black, short-sleeved shirt. Behind them, to the right, is a mannequin, wearing a red Victorian-style dress.
What inspired me to reimagine this particular text is I'm a massive horror fan, and Dracula is kind of one of the originals, it's one of the classics, and I've always loved it. The themes in it that are exciting to me are all about fear and what we're scared of, what societies are scared of, what we're told to be scared of, and who gets to be the scary ones. That kind of all spoke to me from the original text. When adapting anything as a writer, you do have to think about whether your point of view is going to shine a light on the story in a way that is talking to now and talking about what's happening in the world at the moment. And all of the things that I was interested in, all of the sort of the study of fear and what monsters are out there, is all the stuff that I talk about with my friends and with my colleagues, in a political sense, what we're scared of at the moment. And so when I was approaching this, it really was a case of looking at what the original story was saying and looking at what the world is doing right now. I love the Gothic Victorian sensibilities of it, and I didn't want to step too far away from that. But I'm always also looking at who's telling a story, and for me, the biggest pull was to pull out Mina's narrative and hear her version of who she is and why she needs to tell the story to us now.
Stoker's novel really sort of explores the monsters in his society in the Victorian era, and I suppose we are looking at who has the power and who constructs fear in our contemporary society. So we're focusing in on the women and giving them a platform to kind of speak and put things right, or put things differently, or put things from their point of view.
What I tried to do was start from the book and try and use that as the only source material and try and figure out what our adaptation is, and hopefully it sits quite neatly amongst all the many. I mean, that's the amazing thing about this story, is it has been adapted so many times.
The reason why we're always interested in vampires is because they're perpetually adapting to the status quo. Humans are always evolving and changing, and so every single generation is interested in vampires because the vampires have to kind of evolve.
And there's so many different versions of why a vampire is scary or sexy or exciting, and ours are probably all of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. There's something about the liveness of theatre that gives you an extra edge. There's a bit more of a lack of safety in theatre, I think, as an audience member, because you don't know whether the action is going to stay on the stage. And being able to play with that and muck around with what an audience's expectations and their sense of safety is fun, right?
Yeah. And the fact that you're in a room with 500 other people as well.
And that collective energy of like fear.
And the visceralness of theatre. There's something about the kind of human form as well, the actors being on stage, the sound design, the sort of speaker system in the auditorium, the lighting.
We're leaning into the old school storytelling, Gothic ghost story kind of vibe of it. I think it taps into that primal thing that we all have of being told a scary story in the dark, and how terrified you feel. It feels unsafe, it feels like things are shifting around you, and it's kind of like a massive version of that.
We knew really early on that we didn't want to use video because video feels like it doesn't belong, and the gothicness of where it's sort of set and where the story comes from.
What we can do with imagination and a well-placed prop and a well figured out movement, what people don't see and what they can't see as well as what they can. And that's when theatre's really exciting, I think, is what you can kind of create from very little.
And it's quite meta theatrical as well, isn't it? Because of Mina's touring her production of Dracula, and she's got all the props and costumes and stuff in her kind of flight cases, and so there's a sort of really lovely sort of rough theatre, poor theatre kind of quality to the storytelling that Mina's doing. And then there's a bigger storytelling that the production's doing as a whole, which is like slightly different theatrical languages.
It's about shifting narratives, it's about giving people the chance to tell their version of things. I mean, I truly believe that women and non-binary and trans people are the best people to do horror because we know the world as a very scary place and we know what is scary. Where horror becomes problematic is when the gaze is all about the male needs and desires and sensibilities. So you just kind of you shift that gaze and you let the narrative fall into a place where it's being told by the people that have been scared their whole lives and see what they have to say and how they can make things scary for other people. The horror, it sort of pervades, and you know, Dracula's up there with Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll, and you've got so many of the classics that kind of have informed all the versions that have come after that, and then have informed all the horror that we've seen. I'm less into the sort of the gore stuff and more into the creepy supernatural stuff, and I think that that's definitely kind of influenced the way that I've written it. In the room we were talking about some of the creative team really scared by horror and hate it, and I was saying, well, I'm a complete wuss and I do get very scared with horror, but I love that feeling. There's something about that sort of safely rehearsing your worst fears is something that I think is part of watching horror. But when you make horror, you're even more in control of that, and you get to experiment and play around with what is scary, but you're in charge. You know how it works, you know what you're doing, and you know how you're going to do it, and then you get to sort of see the effect it has on people, and that's where the sort of the influences of all the previous horrors come in, because you're playing with all those wonderful tools.
It's kind of like the dream directing gig, really.
Yeah.
You should always be considering the psychology of the audience whenever you're directing any play, but it's kind of your only job, really. The kind of psychological journey and like how we lead them up the garden path, you know, and how we build tension and in order to, you know, scare them at any given point.
It's similar to comedy in that kind of rhythm and, you know, when you're going to drop that joke or that scare.
I'm working with two illusionists, which I've never done before, which feels really new. So I'm learning loads about magic and illusion and the psychology of fear and how we build that into all departments. You know, we all have to be on the same page. Otherwise, you know, if light and sound aren't talking to each other, then that sort of scary moment's not going to work.
Yeah.
And, you know, lighting and illusion, they're going to have to work really closely together in order to, you know, not light that moment, but like that moment, so the magic can happen. So yeah, it's been a really strongly collaborative process.
I've really enjoyed playing in the playground of horror. I love doing it. I have a little fringe company that does horror on stage, and to play in this wonderful theatre with amazing, brilliant people, and yeah, really dig into what can work in theatre and what theatre's capable of in terms of the genre. It's a gift, it's wonderful. What a fun thing to do, what a great job, really, you know. And it's a great story, and it's a classic, and it's fun.